So it's like anyone coming in. Like I remember when I first started to sort of start being on shows and stuff. It took a while for people to warm to me because it's like, hey, who's this guy coming in? He's new. He's not trained. Who is this guy? And it would have been the same sort of thing for you, where it takes a level of while before people sort of open those doors of acceptance.
Definitely, and that's where I've got to be, not just patient but realistic to go. Yeah, you can't be someone like me and just say these things and then expect it's going to happen. So, but it is like as you said before, if you get the right people in the room and you could get at least a conversation going, it would be interesting. Again, maybe it doesn't work. People just go, you know what, I'm not giving away how I'm doing things or whatever. But like anything in life, to get a step change, you need to do something. Needs to happen to get that step change. Money can do it. There's no doubt about that. I said, give me a big budget, and any of us could change the world, right? But that hasn't also proven to be in the wrestling world necessarily the greatest thing either, right? Big budgets can sometimes lead to a tremendous collapse. I've seen some of the sports I've worked in, private owners. I used to joke sometimes to go, if that private owner, he has a divorce or he gets hit by a bus, the whole team's going to fall away, right? Like, so you don't want to be too reliant on somebody with the cash that can just underwrite this stuff, because that doesn't work either.
Well, that's what I feel like is happening with AEW. Like AEW came in and started, and they had such a hardcore, loyal internet fan base. But when you look at their shows, they're not selling out arenas. They're not really drawing big crowds. And if we're going to be realistic, are they comparable to WWE? Like, probably not. You know what I mean? Like, can they be? Yes, in 10 years' time. But you know what I mean? I feel like even then AEW could possibly only be around for a couple more years. But like I said, I could be completely wrong. People said the same thing about TNA 15, 20 years ago.
Yeah, look, it is interesting. And I've got to know some of the guys at AEW. So again, I respect anybody who's definitely playing a lot of money in, and I think they've been good for the industry. Like, I mean, soccer doesn't worry about how many leagues there are around the world, right? It just worries about being as big as it possibly can be. So I think there's a lot of room for wrestling to still keep growing. But you're right. Like the challenge, I think, for the AEWs, TNA, any of these companies is to work, what's your niche in the marketplace that is really compelling. And again, to me, if you don't have a business mindset at that end, it's just fraught with danger, because it could just unravel at any point, as opposed to, and again, WWE is the biggest, it is the best. I know, obviously, we've got Eric Bischoff coming to StarCast. There was a period where it wasn't, and that 90s period. But even that rival, like this, one of the great studies that anyone I reckon who wants to get into business in sport, or probably business, should look at, is to go, how did two rivals go head to head for 2 or 3 years, but the whole industry went up, right? Like, it went up because of that, right? Like, it wasn't for a period that the numbers were being cannibalized. The numbers went up. And again, they weren't collaborating, of course, but it just shows that there are other ways to take things forward. And again, wrestling's now probably settled in. There is one big mothership. Where else do we all fit into that ecosystem? And yeah, I just think that in Australia we've got all the lessons to have been learned around the world, but we have Australian sport and Australian DNA, lifestyle, whatever, to go. There's a way forward for wrestling in this country that I don't have the answer yet. There's a tweak, there's a point of difference, and that will be, again, step change. I'm big on step change. You can't expect things to be bigger and better unless you do. And step change is either a big risk, or not a big risk, but a healthy risk, or doing something different to get that step change, not just it's just going to happen overnight.
Well, you mentioned, when WCW and WWE were going head to head and, bought the business up. I also feel like if we look at that time, they were also pushing the envelope, and it was, that was that Jerry Springer era. That was that remember like the 90s and early 2000s, everything was extreme sports, and and it was more shock. And it's like, if you remember, Steve Austin putting the toy gun to Vince McMahon's head, and you know what I mean? Like, I remember watching that as a 16-year-old going, man, we're going to see this guy get smoked on night. You know what I mean? Like, that was oh my God, I have to see this. And every episode was leaving you with a cliffhanger. So if you watch like really good TV shows like The Sopranos, Sons of Anarchy, or, whatever it may be, they always left you going, oh, damn it.
Yeah.
I've got to come back. I've got to watch. And I feel like wrestling has lost. I think wrestling overall has lost that ability to really sort of grab the audience right at the last moment of the broadcast and go, oh, like, what's going on?
And that's what, like, again, because my time in sport, I thought, like, I think a lot about the broadcasting model and trying to keep racking my brain in different ways that it could potentially be done. Can wrestling be like a Netflix series? Are we different? Are we, like, you think of our sports, we're also very seasonal based. So every wrestling company internationally seems to want to run for 52 weeks of the year. So you can never miss them, right? There's never an off season. We probably have to have an off season because the talent, aren't paid very much. So everyone has to work. So therefore, and that's part of that challenge. But I think that, the path to, like you talked about, certainly like the 90s is, I mean, even my kids watch stuff from the 80s and the 90s when wrestling had, two big boom periods. Obviously, it has had to change. I mean, some of that stuff in the 90s is not aged well. So you can't necessarily, like, you can watch it, but, you're not necessarily telling the world you're watching it. Wrestling storytelling is a big part. And one of the things that's really influenced me too is the live experience. Again, in sport, if you want to watch WWE, the NBA or whatever, you're in Australia, you're going to watch more than you go. I was at an NBA team recently with some of the other work I do in sport, and he said to me, at the Golden State Warriors, he said, more of our fans will never go to a game than go to a game. And I sort of thought, what are you talking about? And even if we've got 200,000 fans here in San Francisco, we've got 2 million fans around the world. I suppose people are never going to go to a game. So you've got the visual broadcast experience. But then we went back to the live experience is so critical because that's ultimately what can influence people. And in our market, again, WWE come out, that's great. Might be here. I do my events but I suppose my events count in this, right? It's that live event experience that wrestling still is great when you do go see really good wrestling live, and the storytelling there. You talked about keeping people on the edge of their seat, but a lot of it is that old school engagement, right? Like good guys, bad guys, face heels, interacting with the crowd. My son's favorite wrestler is probably John Cena, and he has a love-hate relationship with a guy called Jarvis in Melbourne City Wrestling because he gets stuck into him. Jarvis, I'm probably now revealing too much, but unfortunately, Jarvis, he's my son that brings these signs that says, you suck. But Jarvis engages with and the crowd, and then you see more kids bring signs, and you see, that fan engagement piece is one of wrestling's great strengths. So, when you talked about the 90s, they engaged the audience both live. Remember, like all the signs and just packed houses, and by extension, big TV audiences, people drawn into the drama. So, like it's the wrestling DNA is, or the success of it is probably clear to most people. But how you keep that, and again, how do you make that work in a market like Australia is that's that sort of missing piece I think that we're close to.